Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Okay, welcome back to the Agents of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Francisco Gonzalez. And boy, I guess we're up to episode 132 now. And I just want to welcome everybody here and especially welcome my guest today, James Nuveen, who's coming to us from Medellin, Colombia. James, welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thanks for having me, Francisco.
Well, James, we first connected via Twitter, which I guess is known as X now. And for everybody that wants to follow you, I know you're at James Nuveen. That's Nuveen. So they can follow you on Twitter/X, James Nuveen. And that's how we first connected. But we actually got a chance to meet up in person recently during your first ever visit to South Florida. But James, I knew you hail from Wisconsin originally, went to college in Ohio. You're also the founder of New Age Marketing and the creator of the Freedom Files. So we're going to hear a little bit about your journey getting from, say, the Midwest to Medellin, Colombia. But maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit here further than I did and let us know a little bit about your background and where you're from.
Yeah, and I just think that journey, that word might be an understatement because it feels like quite the adventure. But yeah, thanks again for having me, Francisco. It has been a journey up to this point where I now hail from Medellin, Colombia. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have told you that would have ever been a possibility, but here we are. So a little bit about me. I'm from Wisconsin, like you said. I was born in Milwaukee, but actually grew up in North Dakota, of all places. And you probably don't hear that every day, but my dad is an orthodontist and accepted a job out there. And of all the places in the world that we would end up, North Dakota was not on my list. Ended up in Ohio to go to school at the Miami of Ohio, Miami University, and worked in Indianapolis, Indiana for 2 years before coming down here to South America. And what really prompted me to do that was I started my own company after working for 2 years for a consulting company as an employee, and had always known I was entrepreneurial, but really had the opportunity to quit that job and realize my dream of starting my own company, did so, and also realized that I didn't need to be in Indianapolis, Indiana anymore. So made my way down to South America.
I'm sure being from the Midwest, I'm sure you love your family and the people of the Midwest and everything like that. So it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about what made you take the leap to South America. But go ahead. It sounds like you're about to let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I never got the opportunity to study abroad during college, and I started my full-time career about 3 days after I graduated from college. So I didn't get time to go explore the world and explore my interests. So when I quit my job and I was working remotely for the very first time, this is in 2021, so just after the pandemic, I realized that, hey, maybe I should go see the world more. Maybe I should go meet some interesting people. And obviously you can do that in being based in Indianapolis, but I wanted to take a little trip to South America, thought it would be a 3-month trip, and 2 years later, I'm still here.
You're there, and we're going to get into this a little bit, but you're informing me that you're actually set up in your new place that you just bought. You just bought some real estate down there in Medellin, so we're going to get into that a little bit. But I got to make a couple comments here. I just went to Iowa a few months ago for the Iowa State Fair, and it was actually my very first visit to Iowa. And I say that because I have, up until 3 months ago, or 2 months ago, I had 3 states that I had not visited yet. One of them was Iowa. Check that box. I got 2 more, Hawaii and North Dakota. So, James, I didn't know you had some connections there. I'll have to get me to North Dakota soon enough. And maybe you could at least tell me some things the places I should visit in North Dakota that are worth my time.
And usually the comment, Francisco, along those lines, usually the comment I get when I tell people that I'm from North Dakota is that, wow, I've never met someone from North Dakota. So that's par for the course.
That probably is true. Maybe along the way I may have met somebody, but probably not memorable. So, yeah, I would love to get there. I heard that in North Dakota they actually have a place that says like "Save the best for last" because so many people visit there on their 50th and their 50th state. In some ways, I'd actually like to do North Dakota next, so I could jet off to Hawaii for my last state. Since it's so far. But anyway, James, so you've started. Tell us a little bit. First of all, I think you graduated college. You said around 2019. Is that right?
Graduated in 2019. Yep.
And so so then you went to Indianapolis and were working for this consulting company, right? And was I mean, obviously the pandemic affected a lot of everybody in so many different ways, and most people had to work from home, and a lot of people I remember started going to other places. They were coming to my home state of Florida that was a little more free and open, but also because it was warmer and it was a nice climate. If you're going to be stuck somewhere, at least you're in Florida. Not too bad. Other people were going to places like Mexico that were pretty open. Maybe some people were jetting down to Medellin, Colombia. A lot of remote workers down there. When you visit Medellin, as I did for my very first time earlier this year, a lot of co-working spaces, and I know that's been happening for a number of years there. But COVID sort of accelerated that. Did COVID have an impact on you in that way in terms of the remote work and then choosing to kind of travel and live somewhere else?
In a way. So I'll tell you the nature of my job, which was kind of unique at the time. So when I graduated college, I entered this entrepreneurial development program. I'll call it something like that. It was a fellowship program in the state of Indiana that allowed me to work full time for a company, just as post any graduate of college would do. However, outside of that full time job, I also got the benefit of being around 200 other entrepreneurs or people who called themselves entrepreneurially inclined. And a lot of these people were like movers and shakers from all around the Midwest, really, really cool people. And that afforded me a lot of possibilities, a lot of opportunities, meeting people from all over the United States, really fascinating individuals, all my age. The unique part of that program is that it ends after 2 years. So all of my friends who graduated college and maybe were entrepreneurial, they got locked into a job and they didn't have a stopping point in the future. They didn't have this point to reflect on their career and either quit their job or get a promotion or start their own company. I had that, luckily. So at the end of my 2 years, I received an offer for a promotional offer for like a 40% bump in my salary and a whole lot of benefits. Really, I had a great experience with my company, but I realized that no matter what they were going to pay me, it still wasn't getting me closer to my dreams of owning my own company and being a very free individual in control of my own life. So that was a really unique opportunity to say, okay, I have this jumping off point. What am I going to do? And I chose to quit. And 3 days later, I started my own company.
Wow, 3 days later you started your own company, and what this was new age marketing, I suppose.
Yep. And for those first 6 months, it was like everything marketing, everything under the sun. But now I focus much more on content marketing. So I'm a writer. I help people grow their audiences with a written word, and we just added a video component as well. So all things content marketing.
That's great. And so it seems like that has become a sustainable business for you. What was, as you started that, at what point did you decide to start traveling and working? I assume you were working remotely as you were traveling. Where did your journey start? What was the first initiative to go travel and do this work remotely?
I remember back to 2021 when I did quit my job in June. That was June 4th, started my own company June 7th. And by the end of June, my lease was up in Indianapolis, downtown Indianapolis. So I spent the next few months traveling around the United States, seeing a lot of my friends, seeing some family. But I also, during that course, also booked a ticket to South America and thought I would spend, I don't know, a couple months, 2, 3 months in Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama. And I wanted to learn Spanish. So this was just going to be a 3-month adventure, but obviously I think we're going to get into it, but it's turned into much more than that. But during those first few months of starting my own business, that's when I really realized that I didn't need to be physically located in one place to do a really good job for my clients.
So you're traveling. You got 3 months. You went to Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama for I guess the first 3 months. And what kept you? Or you tell me. You're shaking your head. Tell me where you went next, and
Well,
what kept
it
you in South America.
uh-huh. Well, it actually didn't work out that way. So that's how I planned to make this 3-month adventure. However, in just my third week of living here in Medellin, Colombia, I met who is now my girlfriend of 2 years. And I canceled my flight to Costa Rica. I canceled my Airbnb. I canceled out all of my plans for the next few weeks and next couple months to see what would come after that first date with my now girlfriend. And I'm glad I did.
That's great. So you stayed. How long did you stay in Medellin? I mean, that was your first spot, Colombia, on that plan, and then yeah. So how long did you stay in Medellin, and where did you end up traveling afterwards? I assume maybe you took her with you a little bit.
It was going to be a 4-week trip to Medellin and then 4 weeks in Costa Rica, 4 weeks in Panama, but ended up staying about 8 months in Colombia instead. And then I reached my limit of number of days. If you don't have a visa, you can only stay a number of days in Colombia. And I met that limit in the end of 2022. So the back half of 2022, that is when I really started to explore Latin America because I physically could not be in Colombia. Went to 6 other
By the way,
countries.
how long does Colombia make you leave for? Is it just for a day? Is it longer?
You can only spend 180 days in a calendar year in Colombia. So 6 months in 2022, which is what my situation was. So that was January through June, and then the back half of that year I spent traveling all around Latin America.
Great. So what were some of the highlights?
Oh, the highlights.
Where'd you go?
So I have really been all over the place. I've been to probably spent the most time in Ecuador, one of Colombia's neighbors, Costa Rica, Panama, Peru, Argentina, Uruguay. Been to all of those, but of all of them, Colombia is by far my favorite. Ecuador would probably be my second, Argentina being my third favorite.
Yeah, we did a Fearless Journeys group trip to Argentina and Uruguay earlier this year, and we loved it so much. There will be an Argentina 2024 back on the Fearless Journeys calendar. So, and we loved Uruguay too, but it's a little complicated doing both with a group. So, but we may try that again some other time. But this coming 2024, look for if anybody's listening, look for us to announce that pretty soon for April. Anyway, but Colombia. So why, other than the lady there that you met, who's now your girlfriend, why does Colombia stand out to you as your favorite place?
Yeah, and apart from Manu, my girlfriend, I have fallen in love with this country. So you're spot on. And I wouldn't have invested in this country if it weren't for first her, yes, but also my belief in this country, this economy. I love the biodiversity. It's one of the most green, most biodiverse countries in the entire world. I think Brazil might be the only one that beats it out. Peru, I think, is up there as well. So Latin America really reigns in biodiversity, but Colombia is just an absolutely natural and beautiful place. The people, which I think are the most important aspect of any society, any city that you choose to live in, are the sweetest, most amorous, most loving, most familial people that I have ever met. And I genuinely fell in love with that culture, the culture of acceptance, and it's a vibrant culture. People are very excited to see you whenever you walk through the room. And I just fell in love with that. So obviously the biodiversity, the people, the food is just new to me. I learned the language, and that really allowed me to connect with everyone on a whole nother level. And now a lot of people think that I have a Colombian accent, which is funny. But yeah, I would say a lot of those factors have really led me to believe in this place and fall in love with it.
Well, you know, I've only been in Medellin and Bogota as far as Colombia is concerned, and it was only earlier this year, as I mentioned. We're going to be doing a Fearless Journeys group trip to Medellin next month at the end of October. I know you're going to be gone when we're there, but some of us are also going to go to Bogota just ahead of that as well. So it should be great. But one thing that really did stand out to me, I spent about a week in Medellin, is just how green it is, and how it's not just like there's like in New York City, you got the concrete jungle everywhere, and then you've got Central Park over there. It just felt like in Medellin, everything is all encompassing together, right? Like just very green within the urban environment, and also how the whole city, from the public transportation regarding the rail system, the buses, the metro cables, like the Skylift type thing, and even all the sidewalks and bike paths. It just seems like everything connects really, really well there. And obviously, the other thing is, a lot of us when we think of Colombia, a lot of people still think Narcos, right? Like the TV series and what went on there, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, and how violent it was, um, and what's interesting is just the turnaround that Colombia has had in recent years. And if you go over to Comuna 13 and you see like just the vibrancy of that place and how that was one of the most violent areas in the world just less than 20 years ago, really amazing country, and particularly loved Medellin. It's Bogota is really, really large, and it's hard for me to kind of get my head around such a large city. I was only there for a couple of days compared to being a week in Medellin, but I just think Medellin is just a really, really beautiful city and very large still, but nothing on the scale of Bogota.
Yeah, I believe in everybody knows the history of Pablo Escobar and what how dangerous of a place this was just 30 years ago. I think in 91 it was the world's most dangerous city, specifically Medellin. And in
Mm,
2011, Medellin was named the world's most innovative city. So you think about the
wow.
transformation in just 20 years from being the world's most dangerous city to being the world's most innovative city. And like you said, Francisco, you can really see it. And I'm not here to be like a spokesman for for Medellin, uh, but I can say 100%. I can testify to the fact that my life has improved. I'm happier. I'm healthier, and I'm in love with this place. And the city has a saying. They have this is a marketing campaign of theirs, but it's true. They say "Aquí todo florece," which means that here everything flourishes, and they mean that in two different ways. Obviously, you can take that as it's a very green, literally green city. You're in the jungle. You're in Colombia, but you're also at Denver's altitude. So you have
Hmm.
amazing green mountains, the jungles, and then a huge variety of birds and flowers and all that kind of stuff. But also the people flourish. Um, and Medellin is one of the most entrepreneurial cities in Colombia. Colombia itself gets a lot of entrepreneurial dollars from investors and from venture capital. So yes, it's a saying for marketing purposes, but also I've learned that it's true that here everything flourishes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And something I should remind the audience of too that may not be aware if you haven't been to Colombia and especially Medellin, but just like where I was living for about a year, they call it, the eternal spring there, right? And it's the weather, and you just mentioned it's at about Medellin's around 5,000 or 7,000 feet altitude, something in that range. And so you're getting that also just the cool temperatures year round, just that perfect kind of 60s and 70s Fahrenheit. Um, doesn't change very much, and maybe a little rainy during some parts of the season the year more than others, but it just seemed to be a really perfectly cool place.
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
So
it's
James,
the city of eternal spring.
yeah, so James, you just bought some property there, so I want to ask you a couple things about that. But first, let's go back to something you said, and I think this will relate to helping you buy some property. You went down there and you had a really very intentional, yeah, you wanted to learn some Spanish, and um, and obviously you've done that very well. I can hear it in your great pronunciation as well. And so, tell us a few things. First, what was the process of learning Spanish? How much did you know before you started all these travels? And then, what has been basically the best discipline for yourself to really be there and really practice? Because I know in Medellin there's a lot of gringos walking around, especially in El Poblado and other. It could be very easy to just stick in that crowd and just speak English to a lot of other foreigners that are coming through there. Um, but tell us a little bit about how you were disciplined enough to learn and what the best processes were.
Yeah, so before I came to Colombia, I probably had a little bit more background than the average person, but nothing that a few months of Duolingo, very, very basic knowledge and training couldn't get you. I obviously studied Spanish and in up to high school. I believe I had maybe had one semester in college dedicated to Spanish, but like I said, my understanding of the language was pretty basic. So before I came here, I took a few Duolingo lessons, but as people who learn languages like for a living, I know a lot of people who are polyglots and know a lot of languages. Duolingo doesn't serve you a whole lot because once you get here, you're thrust into conversations. You're not reading things on screens, and you can get uncomfortable really fast. So like I said, I had met my girlfriend in my third week here. That first date was pretty brutal. Could only say about three different things, and what I would
So
have
she didn't
liked.
speak any English.
She does not speak English. She still. I learned enough Spanish that she got comfortable speaking Spanish with me, and I understand her perfectly now. I'm fluent, so that I can translate my emotions, the important stuff in a relationship. But she was really the catalyst in helping me learn the language to a point of fluency. Conversation with her every day was really the sole reason that I am fluent today. You can say all you want. You can change the subtitles on YouTube and Netflix. You can listen to Spanish music. You can listen to Maluma and Bad Bunny. You can read books in Spanish, but nothing will help you like conversation will. So I highly recommend if you want to learn a new language, this isn't just Spanish. Conversation every single day with someone who speaks that language will serve you. That is the best way to learn. Conversation is pretty much the only way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, what's interesting was when I was in my week in Colombia, I actually was a little frustrated because I was staying in El Poblado, right? And even when I would walk into cafes and stuff, like the local Colombians would speak to me in English, and I was sitting here trying to speak Spanish, but it wasn't perfect, and so they just, to them it was just easier to proceed in English. So it's kind of like, man, this is getting a little frustrating. But I went to Bogota, and I did not encounter too many people there that spoke English, and in fact, my Uber driver for the day, well, when I got picked up at the airport, we had a 45-minute conversation, like all in Spanish, and I was like so proud of myself. And anyway, he said, "Hey, if you like, I can. Here's my number. Instead of calling an Uber, you could just call me directly, and I can take you around." So yeah, so had him take me around a little bit the next day, and then the next day, him and his brother spent like half the day with me. I took them to lunch, and we went to some tourist sites and things like that. And yeah, it's funny. A few times they were like, "Wow, your Spanish is very good," and because they spoke basically no English, but I realized at that point, like, well, I know a lot of people that speak Spanish. My dad is from Cuba; he speaks Spanish. But when I also know that they speak English, I'll just be lazy and speak English. But when I'm forced to actually have a conversation, that's when I can really practice. So I can see with your girlfriend there who maybe it's a little, maybe you don't even want to teach her English, right, at this point. Just for the sake of your Spanish, but that definitely is a way to learn. And I've also heard that a lot too, right? I mean, when you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't speak, or who speaks a different language, it really does force both of you to learn. So that's a great asset as well. Um,
Yeah, and
and
and if I could say one more thing on language learning, Francisco, it was, and I know you asked this, so I didn't respond to it, I don't think. When I came here, I really wanted to get the full experience. I didn't want to just bring the United States with me in my backpack or on my back. I wanted to live not necessarily like a Colombian, but I wanted to make the most of my experience here. Very few people in Colombia speak English. If you look at a chart in Latin America of who speaks English, who has
hmm,
proficiency levels, Argentina is way up there. Mexico is at the very bottom, to a lot of people's surprise. But Colombia is right there, close to the bottom as well. So, to make the most of my experience in Colombia and then Costa Rica and Panama, I wanted to learn the language and connect with the locals. Um, so that was a major priority for me. I didn't want to just have the normal experience. I wanted to live like a local. I wanted to soak up the culture as much as possible. And really, frankly, that's the only option of doing that is by learning the language and being able to communicate with them. Because without that, you're just another tourist.
yeah, okay. So learning the language and getting to know I mean, you really, it helps you learn the local culture even more when you can learn the language, right? And you get kind of brought into local familiarity with things, and probably making new friendships. So also probably helps you when you're trying to maybe buy some property in a foreign country. Tell us the process. And are you my understanding is you still have your US citizenship, right? Do you have a foreign, some kind of residency in Colombia? And what is the process like in terms of buying property, and how did that Spanish also maybe assist with that?
So Colombia went through some big changes last year where they cut a lot of their options to become a permanent resident immediately upon investing in the country. So it's known as residency by investment. Um, and what I chose to do is become a temporary resident by investing a certain threshold of dollars or pesos, I guess, into the economy via a business investment or real estate investment. And I chose obviously the real estate path. And in 5 years, I will become a permanent resident. And then in 10 years, I will become a citizen if I choose to go through with both of those options. Um, Obviously, those are very much accelerated if I choose to get married or take a different step in that course. Uh, but yes, I'm a temporary resident right now. I have a cedula, which is like a government ID, permanent residency in 5 years if I maintain that investment, and citizenship in 10 years. And then as far as the language goes, yes, it helped me drastically during that process. First of all, communicating with lawyers, communicating with realtors, communicating with everybody in the process because it's very involved. Um, and then second, reading all these like legal documents. I didn't know all the legal language before going through that process, so a lot of it was very new for me. But going through that process, having learned the language allowed me to avoid a lot of scams, avoid a lot of not so great people, and do everything the right way, which is how I needed it to be in order to qualify for the visa. Everything needed to be 100% by the book, no cutting corners, no saving on, no penny pinching or anything like that. Everything had to be perfect in order to apply for that visa. So, yes, it very, very much helped me throughout that month-long process. Yeah.
So let me ask you something. Do you have to be a resident or citizen to own property in Colombia?
In Colombia, you do not.
No, you do not. It's just part of the process of becoming a resident and possibly a citizen later accelerates if you do own property.
Yeah, so I purchased there are many ways to become a permanent resident. There are many ways to become a citizen. However, I also wanted a home. I wanted a home base, and owning something is always something that I wanted to do. So chose the path of owning real estate, investing in real estate here. And like I said, it has to be above a certain dollar threshold or peso threshold to qualify for that visa. So bought the property, um, and applied for the visa and received the visa. Yep.
So, you know, James, I wrote a book called The American Dream is a Terrible Thing to Waste, right?
I've
And,
started it,
you know,
Francisco.
one of the things, oh, great. And, you know, I say that because you are a US born citizen, right? And by the way, let me ask you another quick question about Colombia. If you became a Colombian citizen, would you also be able to keep your U.S. citizenship, or does the U.S. kind of make you give that up? Or
Colombia has dual citizenship, so I am allowed to have both an American passport and a Colombian passport. And by the way,
oh,
I,
that's
I know
great.
that you
Well,
asked this just a second ago too, but I have no plans of renouncing my American citizenship. The US is still home for me. All of my family, not all of my family, but most of my family still lives there. I'm 26 years old, so I'm not quite ready to cut off that option of entering the United States, even if it means I have to pay taxes in a country that I don't live. The US is one of two countries in the world that has citizenship based tax, which means that if you have American citizenship, you pay taxes in America, no matter where you live, no matter what you do, no matter anything. Um, but I think
Uncle Sam
I
still wants
know
his
the
cut.
United States is very important to me. So I just want to make that very clear. I have no plans of renouncing my citizenship anytime soon.
Well, we're glad to hear that. But you know, as a U.S. born citizen, I mentioned the American dream, and it sounds like, you know, for a lot of people, the American dream means a lot of things, right? I think overall, it pretty much means being able to kind of, you know, live the life you want, pursue the vocation you would like, you know, live that life of your dreams. And it's different for everybody, right? What everybody wants to do. But for a lot of people, part of the equation of the American dream is home ownership. You now have achieved home ownership, but not in the United States. You went to Medellin, right? Is this the first place you've owned in your life?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's the first time that I've ever bought real estate, and it just so happens to be international.
So, what can you say, James Nuveen, who has left the United States, pursued his dreams, and secured home ownership in Medellin, Colombia? What can you say about the American dream, and are you living it?
Whoa, that's a big one. Well, Francisco, I obviously home ownership, yes, is definitely a part of the American dream. I would say that the American dream more broadly is all about freedom. I mean, if you look back to the Pilgrims when they first came to what became the United States, they wanted freedom from the tyranny of the English kingdom, the English church as well, and that was their method of becoming more free, to start a new country in a new land. And the whole Revolutionary War was fought to get Great Britain off of their backs. That was all about freedom, to determine their own future, to determine their own path. And that's what freedom is still about to me. Freedom is about optionality. Freedom is about mobility. Freedom is about independence. My ability to provide for my family and for myself with assets, with ownership, with um, a life that isn't constrained by anyone, any country, or anything. So to me, and I talk about this in the Freedom Files all the time, my life is all about building more freedom for myself. That's why I started my own company. That's why I don't work for anyone else anymore. That's why I have a home. Another reason I have a home. It's another reason why I wanted multiple options when it comes to residencies and passports. It's the same reason why I'm a big believer in Bitcoin and detaching country from monetary policy. All my life is about freedom, and to me, that means that's what the American dream is. That's all about freedom.
So James, it's interesting. We got a lot to talk about in this area here, and I am a subscriber to your Freedom Files newsletter. I encourage people who are listening to this that might be just a little bit interested in what you have to say to subscribe to the newsletter. I think it's freedomfiles.co, right, for your website, and they can subscribe there. But you send out a lot of really good information. But we're living in a day and age now where there's a lot of challenges to the American dream, maybe challenges to home ownership, maybe challenges to the kind of life people want to live, and maybe it's income versus inflation and all these sorts of things that are involved. So, with that being said, one of the other things, it's part of you mentioned. I mean, again, it all revolves around freedom, right? And for you, you have also found that in becoming your own boss in a sense, right? Having your own company. You could do that from pretty much anywhere on US soil or many places abroad, like you've taken your business as well. But it's interesting. You're now the owner of your own company. You own your own home. You've charted your course to a new place and have made a decision on how you want to live and where you want to travel and how you can work every day. So you've secured a lot of freedom, and I know now you're helping other people secure freedom. But it's interesting because I saw in one of your newsletters, probably 6 months back now, you referenced this book, The Sovereign Individual. And I've had some friends that have actually recommended this book over the years, and I took a look, and it was a decent sized book and seemed pretty something deep that you really need to get engaged with, and I just wasn't ready for it. But it's funny, I've been kind of thinking about reading it, and then finally I saw you write about it, and I was like, okay, I got to finally listen to this. And so I listened to it on Audible. It was great. But it really, now that I've actually lived abroad for a year in Guatemala and I've seen people like you and many other people, can you give us a little background about the Sovereign Individual, kind of a little bit about the book? And I know it was first published, I think, in the 90s. And it's like when you're reading it now, it just seems like, wow, this was so prophetic. Like so much stuff has happened that came true. Maybe a few things were a little off, but tell us a little bit about the book and maybe how it impacted you and your thought as well.
Yeah. First of all, yes, it was published in the 90s. I'm not sure the exact date, but it doesn't matter. It was way before its time to be talking about the many topics that it did talk about, like freedom, money, like about entrepreneurship, mobility, all these topics. People weren't really talking about that until the 2010s and 2020s, especially during COVID and what we've seen in the last few years, because more and more people want more freedom by the day. And yeah, that book was a fantastic read for me. I think I've read it now twice or three times. But the first time was when I first made that leap to Colombia. Like I said, I thought that was just going to be a quick trip to Latin America and back to the United States, where I would rent an apartment again. But obviously has turned into a journey to ultimate freedom. And to me, after reading that book, what that means to me is being able to do what I want, when I want, where I want, how I want. So there are many different steps to that. There's starting your own business. There's decoupling yourself from the financial system and starting to use crypto or Bitcoin in my case, and not being attached to a certain country's government and monetary policy. Those are all major themes of the book. But they also talk about how, and this is probably the main thing that stuck out in my mind from reading that book, is that we should treat countries, and I don't care if you're from the United States, the UK or Australia, whatever, but we should all treat our countries and any countries in the world as corporations. We should treat them as corporations, and as such, it's their job to court us, citizens, customers, because we pay taxes. That is our price to pay for having an American passport or a British or English passport or an Australian passport. That's our price to pay. And because of that, we can choose from all these different countries, the 190 countries in the world, that offer different benefits, offer different consequences of owning a piece of them, paying taxes and being a part of their program, of being part of their country. And the way that they court citizens is with their tax policy, their culture, their business climate. All of these different things add up to one glob of a country. And what you, Francisco, value in a country is different than what I value in a country. And what I value in a country is different from what you value in a country. So my choices, especially over the last 2 years, have led me down a path where I think my life is a little bit better in this moment in my life in Colombia. If I have kids, that might change. If the tax policy changes, that might change. If the United States gets rid of the IRS, that might change. So there are all of these different features of a country that lead their citizenry, their customers, to choose different paths in the world. And that's probably the most important thing that I learned from The Sovereign Individual. And I highly recommend anyone read that book. Fantastic, fantastic read.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think one of the big takeaways for me was more, even on the flip side of what you said, how countries, nation states, will view us, or they'll basically be competing for customers in terms of competing for citizens. And the other thing that really fascinated me about the book, and a friend of mine a few years ago, we were having some deep conversations about all sorts of political philosophy and all these things, and he said to me something about, oh, the nation state is on the decline or something like that, right? I mean, it was a little more detailed, but I remember just like, you, and then said, you need to read this book. And I kind of dismissed the book. Like, what is he talking about? The nation state is on the decline, right? And then, maybe my mindset just got to a place where I could accept that a little bit more. But the way it's really explained more in the book, I'm a big fan of history. I have 2 degrees in history. So I love thinking about the broader context of history. And really, it really wasn't apparent to me until this book like pointed it out, that the nation state is a blip in history, right? I mean, it is a very, very, very new thing. In fact, when we even think of great nations in Europe, Italy, Germany, they have not been nation states that long. Most of them were not nation states until the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century. And so you have this like push for nationalism in that like 19th and 20th century, some of which did not go so well in many places, and led to several world wars. But the interesting thing about this is we all, we grew up, especially people, we're very proud to be Americans. We're proud of the service of our military to protect us and all these sorts of things. But also, so we kind of feel very wedded to that nation state, to that flag, to our patriotism. But at the same time, I think we really also have to take a step back and say, but wait a second, like this is a very small blip in history. And what we should be probably more wedded to are some of the things you talked about, the principles, right? The principles that were outlined in, say, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And what were those? And you went back, it was interesting, you brought up the story of the Pilgrims, right? They left, and the Americans have always been, since that beginning time, people on an adventure. I mean, shoot, if you go to Epcot Center up the road here at Walt Disney World, you actually have different countries in the World Showcase. I don't know if you've been there, but you got France, you got Germany. In America, it's not called the United States of America. It's called the American Adventure, right? And so it's kind of interesting. We've always been a people on the move, and we've always been moving towards wanting more freedom and having battles about freedom. But it's interesting when it comes down to freedom. I was looking at your website before this, just preparing a little bit to see how you kind of organized everything. And so you're talking about you want to help people. In addition to all the other work you're doing, you now are helping coach and people to give up their job, quit their job, you say, start a business, reduce your taxes, travel the world, control your time, put your health first. So James, you want to talk a little bit about how those things kind of help people with their freedom, and how you might be able to help them if they're listening to this?
Yeah. I think it helps to add a little bit more context to my story, because I wouldn't be able to talk about these things if I hadn't experienced them, right? It's like a 18-year-old talking about quitting their job. That's just not a thing. But I have all this experience that has led me to think that, man, just 2 years ago, I had a job. I didn't. I liked my job. I was content. But there's a big difference between being content and being happy and being truly happy. And for me, I made a lot of big decisions that were really scary at the time because I didn't have anyone to lead me through those different challenges. The challenges of quitting a job, the challenges of starting a business, the challenges of moving out of moving out of my home country and exploring this new world, new continent, learning a new language, buying international real estate, dating someone who doesn't even speak my language. Like all these things 2 years ago, I would have never told you in a million years I would have done. But now I've gone through them. And the Freedom Files, which I started building earlier this year in February or March of 2023, is dedicated to that. I know that because of what I've experienced over these last 2 years, I can help people. I can help people go through those big changes. I can help people quit their job. I can help people start their own business. I can help people move out of the United States and explore the world. I can help people buy real estate. I can help people learn a new language. I can do all these things because I have done them myself. I can help people because I've done them myself. So the Freedom Files is what you are referring to, Francisco. On freedomfiles.co is where I write about all my adventures. Yeah, I have a daily newsletter. A twice a week newsletter where I update everybody on what I'm going through in the moment and try to address a lot of the challenges that I've gone through over the last 2 years and the challenges that I'm still to go through because life is about progress. I'm not done yet. So the Freedom Files is dedicated to that. I write most of my content on that website or on Twitter. YouTube channel is starting in a matter of weeks here in September, so I'm getting really excited about that. And like I said to you, Francisco, I do have that coaching program, but that was a one-time thing. So if I do end up running that again, my newsletter list will hear about it first. So if you're interested in going through a lot of those steps that I just went through over the last 2 years, I might be running another coaching cohort where we walk through all those steps one by one. And if that's of interest to you, subscribe to the newsletter and there will be news about it.
Okay, James. So you talked a lot there about, with what you're doing with the Freedom Files. You had to have the experience yourself of going through a lot of these things before you could help people on their own journey. And that's, like to say, no one travels alone. But you've been charting the course for other people so that you could, help guide them down their own path, maybe a path that you've gone down in your own life, in your own way. But, you mentioned before, I've seen some of your tweets and some of the things you write about in your newsletter that, that you've never been more happy, more fulfilled. Was there a point where maybe it was in college or during that corporate job? I know that one job had a sort of 2-year ending point, but was there a point there where maybe you weren't happy, you weren't fulfilled? Maybe you thought about it consciously, maybe you thought about it later. I don't know. And what was also just like the spark to make you say, hey, I really got to do something different?
I'm an eternal optimist. So I was born positive. I'm always optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about my current status in life. I'm always happy. But however, the word that I should use there is content. So I wouldn't say there's one moment that really was a catalyst in making a lot of those decisions. However, I remember this very clearly in January of 2021. So there were about 6 months left of that 2-year program that I was talking about, and I didn't know what I was going to do yet. And I went through this course by Donald Miller, who is a marketer and just an amazing individual. He's an author and a business builder. And he has this course called Hero on a Mission, where he encourages you to go through this process of writing your own obituary. And that, I guess I would say that would, if I were to pick one, that would be the catalyst in helping me figure out that I didn't want to work for someone else. I wanted to be free. I wanted to explore the world a little bit more. I wanted to start a family. I wanted a lot of these things that I didn't really discover up until doing that exercise. And although it sounds a little bit morbid, it's incredibly introspective and helpful in figuring out, okay, this is what I want to get in life. Am I currently living that reality? And if not, how can I get to that point? So that led me to think about quitting my job. That led me to think about starting my own business. That led me to think about traveling, all these different kinds of things, because those are things that I've always wanted to do in my life. Now, if I do that exercise again, the obituary would probably read a little bit differently because I have different goals. I have changed just 2 years later. But it was an incredibly helpful exercise in helping me go through a lot of change very quickly. And if I were to say there was one moment where I that was a catalyst in helping me go through a lot of those decisions, make those decisions, writing my own obituary was definitely one of them.
I know you said it sounds morbid, but I've read from several really great authors that we should be thinking about our own death a lot more. And they mean it, I think, in the context that you're bringing up. We only have so much time. And, I talked before about the nation state being a blip in history. Well, we individuals are a real blip in history, and we really don't have that much time. And that's actually something we all share, is no matter if you're a billionaire or somebody living in poverty, really, one might live 20 years old and one might live 80 years old or 100 years old, but that's not really that much different in terms of the kind of time that we have here to make an impact and to do the things we want to do and to kind of craft the life we want to live. So I think that's great what you did. I've got two final questions here and a little bit relate to picking up and leaving. One, you've obviously got your family back, I think, in Wisconsin, and maybe some other family and friends in other parts of the states. What does your family think about you picking up and leaving, and now spending time in Colombia? Have they come down and visit? And again, yeah, what is kind of some of the conversations? You don't have to get too personal with us, but at least share with us, because from a lot of people, maybe that's one of the big things, that whether it's leaving their home state and going across the country or going across a pond, across an ocean or another continent. It seems like a long place to go, especially being distant from family. What are some of the challenges there?
Traveling to another continent is one thing. I think everybody could empathize with that drive to go see the world a little bit when I first made that decision. I think living in another country is another thing where there's a little bit of disconnect. The maybe my grandpa, who just passed away last year, that was hard for him to understand. Why would you want to go to a less safe place? We have everything in the United States. Why would you want to go out elsewhere? And then I talked to my dad, where he's actually the one who really inspired me to make a lot of these changes. And now, after selling his company, he was an entrepreneur and orthodontist. He lives in Thailand and is now in Portugal, and is traveling the world with his wife at just 57 years old. So I've inspired him. He's inspired me a little bit. He's inspired me mostly, and I've inspired him a little bit to go now travel. But my family, my mom has visited. My dad would like to visit. My brothers will visit at some point. This is my new home. So they enjoy the fact that I'm happy. And I think that's what matters most. And to my friends that maybe don't understand why, it doesn't matter, because the benefits that they see from a happier, healthier Jimmy or James outweigh the reasons. So a lot of people don't understand it, but at the end of the day, I don't think they really need to. As long as they see a smile on my face, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, honestly, Colombia is not that far. I'm sitting here in South Florida, and it's about a 3-hour flight here. I could actually get to Colombia faster than I could visit my brother who lives in Colorado. And so it's in retrospect, if you're kind of looking at the broader context, it's not too far. It is a different country, maybe a different set of rules of law, different set of culture, all sorts of things like that you have to evaluate and think about, but obviously a place you really like. We're also living in a very connected world today, right? So we could do this, right? I could have a conversation with you. I could text you in 3 seconds and, you know, all these sorts of things. But also, we have this thing called airplanes, and we get places very, very fast these days. So I know that you were just in South Florida a couple weeks ago, and you didn't just have breakfast with me, but you were here hanging out with some of your college buddies. I think that you guys all met up in Miami. So, I think the world is a lot smaller place today than it's ever been, and people can really connect. One thing I want to talk about, though, maybe to close this out a little bit, one of the last questions is, I one of the things I talked about in my book, "The American Dream is a Terrible Thing to Waste," is one of the kind of people I look at that really have what I call an entrepreneurial mindset is the immigrant. And I think that what I also tell people is entrepreneurs need to have the immigrant mindset. And I say that we have a lot of challenges in the United States right now, probably more than we've had in a long time, although I feel like every generation says that. Um, we have maybe big oppressive government, right? You could talk about that. A lot of regulations, a lot of taxes. Maybe the reason some people want to escape out a little bit. We have inflation's going on. Jobs are drying up, going overseas. We have AI also, posing some challenges to the economy. So lots of different, particularly economic challenges, culture wars. We could talk about very politically divisive times here as well. And so a lot of Americans, including young Americans, kind of look and say, man, there's just not that many opportunities anymore. And an immigrant walks into this country and they just see opportunities everywhere, right? Especially the immigrants from Central and South America who maybe don't have a lot of those opportunities in their place. And so I think that's kind of what the entrepreneur mindset is. It's seeing opportunities where other people do not. And so I've kind of said to people, I think we kind of more of us need to have an immigrant mindset, be, first of all, appreciative of this place that has offered us a lot of freedom and opportunity. And also, that we kind of see more of these opportunities, but also the immigrant has done something very interesting, especially a lot of they've picked up from the place they've known and go to the unknown. Right now, for maybe some people who have left like impoverished places in Central America, or maybe like communist governments like Venezuela, picking up believing maybe the physical journey was very tough too, right? Trying to get to a border and all these sorts of things. But still, the immigrant mindset that maybe you have now as well, like picking up from your home place, kind of going a little bit to the unknown. Tell us a little bit about that mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset maybe that you have, and the willingness to kind of take a journey to a little bit of the unknown.
Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy, comparison between the immigrant, which I now am, and the entrepreneur. I do believe that, if you looked at the numbers, I don't know what the numbers are, but if you look at how many immigrants in the United States turn out to be entrepreneurs, it might even be higher than the entrepreneurship rate of Americans, native, like national Americans, citizens. So that's a really interesting comparison you make. For 2 years, when I started this journey, I lived out of a 50-liter backpack. So I had very little with me. I had about a computer, a few sets of clothes, and that's about it. But that was enough for me to grow my business from zero, essentially, to what it is now, that it allows me to live this lifestyle and live much better in the United States, or live much better in Colombia than I would in the United States. I do spend a lot of time thinking about what could be better, because there's a lot, just as Colombians would go to the United States and think the same. I don't know if I really have a good answer for you on the topic of how that has changed over time. I still think about serving Americans. In my content marketing business, I only work with Americans. I still focus on helping Americans and helping American creators, specifically authors, thought leaders, helping them grow their audience and make the most out of their brains, what they have in their heads. I try to get them to put that out on paper and help people. So I still think about American creators and my American clients and helping Americans much more than I do here in Colombia, but that will change certainly. I'm looking into ways to partner up with Colombian entrepreneurs and owning a physical business for the very first time in my life, because it's all about experimentation, right? Especially in this phase of my life. I want to try a whole lot of things out and see what sticks. So I still very much have that entrepreneurial mindset. I'm curious to see how it changes in the future.
Well, being curious and creative, I think, is one of the top characteristics of being an entrepreneur or having an entrepreneurial mindset. So we're glad to see that you continue that curiosity and see how things might be in the future. Also, one of the things I got to tell people is as they take part in your website and your newsletter, and I know you've been publishing some city guides from different cities across Latin America, including Medellin. I actually got your Medellin guide. It's really great. And so I think people maybe who want to travel to lots of places in Latin America, particularly, can connect with you there and learn a little bit about the travels that you have pursued, and also some of the tips you have for people traveling to those places. So that's good. So freedomfiles.co is a great place to connect with James Nuveen, who's really an agent of innovation in this world, whether it's the world of Twitter X or whether it's the world of just being an expat living abroad and buying property in a foreign country, establishing a path to establish some residency, learning Spanish, building a business, building a life of his own. So I think a lot here we can take, James, to really be inspired by your work and what you're doing. So I really applaud you, and we'll continue to follow your fearless journey as well. And any last thoughts maybe here you wanna mention to the audience before we sign off?
One thing that I would leave people with is, I think one thing that I like to live by, and I hope other people do as well, is that I think it's your obligation to make the most of your potential. Whether that's sharing your journey online and helping people with whatever, whether it's painting, whether it's becoming a better writer, whether it's traveling the world, I think it's our obligation to teach what we know. So that's what I'm trying to do, both in my writing business and in the Freedom Files. And that's exactly what you're doing, Francisco, in Fearless Journeys. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad a lot of these listeners are here. And that's what I would leave you with.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting down to Medellin in just a matter of weeks on our next Fearless Journeys group trip. Just sad to see that we didn't time it right for you to be there at the same time as you're going to be on your own vacation with family abroad. So that's great. But this is a great thing about this platform, is how we can continue to connect people with innovators across the world, including James Nuveen. So James, thank you again so much for being our guest here on the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thanks, Francisco.